Welcome to the May 31st edition of the Saints Insider Podcast. I am Luke Johnson, filling in for Zach Ewing, who is doing God knows what today. I'm joined here today by Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Jeff Duncan, and we're going to talk a little bit about Drew Brees today. Yesterday was Drew Brees Day at the Saints facility. They announced his induction into the Saints Hall of Fame, which giant shocker. So we're gonna chop it up a little bit, talking some Drew Brees today, talking about some of our favorite memories of Drew, relive some of the Saints' glory days, and we'll go from there. Sound good, guys?
Yeah, sounds good. I can't believe he got in the Hall of Fame. Can you all?
Yeah.
I mean, it was must have been a close vote.
Right. Jeff and I are actually on the committee, and you've been on a lot longer than me, but I'm pretty certain that was the fastest meeting we ever had. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of discussing, obviously, and in years past, I mean, we've had to discuss some people, but with this one, definitely wasn't the case. I don't think do we even actually vote? I don't know.
I think it was unanimous. It was the first. Yeah. I think it might have been the first unanimous selection we've had, as far as I remember.
How many records does Drew Brees? Okay, 1, 2, all of them. Okay,
yeah,
sold.
All right.
Yeah,
look, I thought his press conference was pretty Brees-like, right? I mean, I think we've all forgotten how he likes to touch on every base, and I think he came in like he always did, prepared to really sum up his career. And the thing that stood out to me was how he talked really about others more than he talked about himself, which is kind of his leadership style. But he did a good job, I think, of really showing if anybody doubted. And look, we've seen it lately. I don't know about you all. I've seen some trolls out there that are have tried to tarnish a little bit of his last few years. If anybody had to be reminded how great Drew Brees was and his leadership ability, they should watch that press conference yesterday, all of it. You'll see why he was not only the greatest player in history, but the greatest leader they ever had.
Yeah, we were talking about it off air before we started recording here, but it was almost like a TED Talk yesterday, right?
Yep.
Drew Brees has his career lined up as a motivational speaker if he wants to do it. I'm sure he could do it and make a ton of money doing it. Yeah, he was phenomenal yesterday, and I think that was just a reminder of the type of dude he is. And that's why a lot of people in that locker room gravitated to him. It wasn't just because he was great at football,
right?
Yeah, there's definitely a charisma there with Drew Brees that maybe isn't evident on a TV screen, but when you're around him in person, you see why people gravitate toward him.
I thought it was cool too to see Cam Jordan was in there, Eric McCoy, Taysom Hill, three of probably the biggest leaders on the team. Three of the kind of key players. Most of the coaching staff was in there. Dennis Allen was in there. And I think
Jari Evans, Josh Hill were in there too, his former teammates.
Yeah, just some key guys. And I know they had meetings, and I think they were excused from some of them, and then they were going to others. But obviously, you have a chance to honor Drew Brees, especially guys that played with him. I thought it was cool to see those guys in there paying their respects.
Yeah. All right. So let's just talk about the fact of the matter here. Drew Brees going into the Saints Hall of Fame. We don't know yet when that's actually going to happen. It's going to happen at some point during this season. But look, as you guys were alluding to, this was inevitable, right? As soon as he is eligible to go into basically any Hall of Fame,
yep,
he's going to go in. He's going into the Saints Hall of Fame this year. He's going to go into the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame this year. Jeff, when is he going to be eligible for the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
25.
Definite first ballot guy.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just zoom out, take a look at his career. He led the NFL in passing yards, I think, 7 times in his career. Yeah. He's the only NFL player with more than 2 5,000-yard passing seasons to his credit. He has 5.
It's insane.
Absolutely. He did stuff that doesn't make sense. NFL's all-time leader in completion percentage. I think if you go back right now and look at the all-time rankings for single-season completion percentage,
he's got most of them.
I think minimum 200 passing attempts, which is most of a season. I think he's got 6 out of the top 9.
Right.
6-time leader in the NFL in completions, 6 times in completion percentage, 4 times in passing touchdowns. The guy had an absolutely insane career for a long span of time. And obviously the Saints were beneficiaries of it. Super Bowl 44, He was a Super Bowl 44 MVP. The Saints won 10 games or more 9 times in his 15 years here. And I think they only had 4 10-win seasons in their entire history before he got here. The guy absolutely changed the franchise. So obviously he's going in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're going to probably get into his off-the-field stuff too, but I was just trying to think of like some other athletes who were such a perfect fit for a city at the right time. And I mean, he was just, the stars just really aligned for him to be in New Orleans when, you know, you look at the time he came after Katrina and then where the franchise was and just what he was able to do. I mean, it's just pretty incredible that one person could, you know, change the entire landscape like that. And I say one person, I mean, obviously you got to include Sean Payton in there too, but what Drew Brees did was just incredible. It's just a run that, I mean, it'll be hard for anybody to ever replace what he did for this city.
And Matt, I actually want to get your take on this because unlike the rest of us, you never actually covered Drew Brees, you know, as you know, you were covering the team he played for. So for somebody who, you know, grew up watching football, you know, he was, I'm sure, playing while you were a kid. Who's, you know, for somebody who started covering the NFL at the tail end of his career, you know, kind of what's your kind of big picture view of Drew Brees?
Yeah, I mean, an incredible player. It's kind of funny. So my first road game, being a beat writer, I took over kind of midway through the 2017 season. My first road game was in New Orleans, and so you kind of peel back the curtain of how this job is done, and you're supposed to write the game or as it's happening. You're supposed to file out the gun. Well,
yeah, which game was that, Matt?
In 2017, Washington, who I used to cover, was up, I think, 17 points. They were up comfortably in the fourth quarter, and Brees just put together this incredible comeback. I was maybe not prepared the way I needed to be prepared. I did not give myself enough writing room, and so my deadline copy, at least the instant gamer anyway, was a complete mess, to use my editor's words. So that was a fun learning experience that wasn't so fun at the time. But
So
Was
your
that
first,
the game that they came back and won?
yes, yeah. So Chris Thompson, the Washington angle is Chris Thompson broke his leg. That was like a very big injury for them. The offense really stuttered down the step, and it was. And then New Orleans came back and won. So
The reason I
So
remember
your
that,
introduction to Drew Brees was him ripping your heart out personally. Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
well, the reason I remember that is I think there's a famous photo of Brees and Payton jogging off the field, kind of congratulating each other from that game because they kind of done nothing, right?
Yeah.
Most of the game, and all of a sudden, it's kind of like that Brady comeback against the Saints a couple of years ago. Very similar thing where all of a sudden they just lit it on fire at the very end and kind of stole a game that they were going to lose.
I mean, if you're covering Drew Brees, I mean, that's kind of what it's like, though. He had a lot of comebacks, and you got to do a lot of being able to write at the end on a deadline because the outcome could very well change.
Yeah, and that 2017 season was also just kind of the start of a great stretch to close Brees' career. I think in his last 5 seasons, 17, 18, 19, 24 seasons, the Saints had more wins than any other team in the NFL during that stretch. And a lot of that, even though Drew was hurt toward the tail end of his career, a lot of that was because of Drew. You know, I mean, we've seen the way this offense has kind of fallen off since he retired. I think a lot of people at that late stage of his career were kind of doubting whether Drew could still do it and, you know, doubting the ability to throw the ball downfield and all that stuff. But I think we're seeing now just exactly how important and how good he still was at the tail end of his career.
Yeah, and he talked about that. He talked about how basically he had to retire because of his arm. He just couldn't throw anywhere. I don't think he throws now. He said he throws left-handed with his kids, right? Because of his right shoulder's so bad. That tells you what he was going through late in his career, but he was still able to be successful because of his knowledge, his instincts, being proactive, getting the ball out quick and all those things. But, I mean, the run he went on, the success that the organization has enjoyed when he was there with him and Payton, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see that kind of run. I mean, 13-win seasons, we started taking those for granted. They made it look so easy. And then just the records that, you know, we were listing off yesterday at the press conference. I mean, I think about that night. It was late in his career. Remember the Colts game when he completed every pass but one, I think it was?
I'm gonna be bringing that up later.
Yeah, that was like insane. I remember Sean Payton texted me the next morning, and he just said he was marvelous yesterday. That's all he said to me in a text. And I was like, yeah, I know, I was there. We watched it. But, like, even he was probably going through the film the next day. And as much as Sean had seen of Drew Brees, even he was kind of marveling at his ability at that point of his career. I thought it was kind of cool.
And I think it's a credit to him of how he, reinvented himself down because
Right.
the arm didn't work. But they still had amazing offenses during that stretch. And it's just, he talked a lot about yesterday about how when he took his free agent visit or when he first got here, Sean Payton was kind of diagramming the San Diego Chargers offense that Brees played in rather than his own offense. He thought they were going to come in and be this West Coast offense, and Sean really adapted to him. And I think their relationship is what made it so successful from at least the outside, the inside as well. But just being able to constantly adapt was just a very successful relationship between the two.
And
of them.
if you want to learn more about that, go buy the book Payton-Brees by Jeff Duncan, and you'll learn just about everything you can.
Oh, it's up there.
Yeah, here we go.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say.
Right here. Jeff, you went into that pretty
I'll
deeply
take it.
in that.
Well, look, I would say this. You forget also, like, if you go back and look at those early Brees years, and it's probably instructive for us now with Kubiak coming in and installing a new offense. Like, it's going to take a little time. I mean, this thing ain't going to change overnight, and it wasn't that way with Payton and Brees. Those are early games they won before the dome coming with the Gleason block. Brees was throwing for like 160 yards, 170 yards. He wasn't lighting it up. That came later. That came about. Really, the offense took off. If you go back and look, the end of the 2008 season, leading into Super Bowl, that's when it all started clicking. They had that receiving core, and Brees really was in his groove. He was in his prime, and you could see the momentum. If they could just fix the defense, which they did. They brought in Greg Williams, overhauled the secondary. They could be good. And I remember distinctly kind of being a little bit of a homer that offseason going, I was the kind of the beat columnist at the time. I was like, I think they're going to be good this year, even though they've been 8-8. But you could just see they kind of fixed what needed to be fixed. I didn't know they were going to be that good. 13-0. Like, think about that. I think it's happened like 7 times in NFL history. And there was another team that did it that year. It was a crazy run, and those numbers. I mean, the other number that I think people forget about, like how incredible was the streak, the Johnny Unitas streak of games with a touchdown pass. That speaks to his consistency. Like we see Carr now. Carr can light it up sometimes. Jameis Winston can light it up, but they have these dips. And Brees just was always there, and it was easy to take for granted his greatness. To be able to break those kind of records that stood for decades was just remarkable. I don't know if we'll ever experience anything like it again. Probably not.
Okay, so I want to kind of take this in a little bit of a different path here. Just everybody knows the Drew Brees on the field and all of his accomplishments and records and everything like that. And Matt, maybe you're going to have a hard time with this, but I spent 4 seasons covering Drew Brees. Jeff, his entire career here in New Orleans. Rod, 7 or 8?
6 or 7, I think.
Yeah, okay. So we all have had a lot of exposure to Drew. We've seen how he is behind the scenes. We've all had personal interactions with him. So when you're thinking back on your time with Drew, and Matt, you can kind of take this wherever you want, but what's kind of the thing about him that sticks out to you? What do you think? What do you think it is about Drew that made him great? Because look, he's 6 feet tall. Drew is as Sean Payton will tell you, was a great athlete. Drew could really sling the ball, but he wasn't Aaron Rodgers. He's not built like
Right.
Cam Newton, right? He had to overcome some things. So when you had these personal interactions with him, what do you think it was that made Drew great? Like what are your memories of him?
I would say probably just his discipline. I mean, there were even like on we talked to quarterbacks on Wednesdays, and he was just such a stickler to his routine. Like you couldn't really get him off of his routine. He was going to do what he was going to do. When it comes to his body, he was going to talk to the media at a certain time, and I remember one time he got a little upset. I think because they were trying to. He was doing whatever he was doing for his body, but they were trying to I think rushed him out to do an interview or something. He wanted to stick to his routine. I mean, that's just how he was, and all that stuff was important to him. And I mean like every single minute of his day seemed like it was like just mapped out, and I think that's what made him so great, and I think that's what makes all the greats like they are. I mean, you think about LeBron, all those people. I mean, people that are really good. That's why they're good.
Yeah.
I think just kind of being around him yesterday too really kind of honed us in, and I observed it from the outside. But it was the composure for me. You know, he talked a lot about he didn't get the things he wanted in high school, and he didn't get the things he wanted in college, and he wanted to be a baseball athlete. But when you hear people like talk about slights, sometimes it comes off as that they're still like pissed off about it in the fact, or that they or use it to drive them as this constant thing. But he was actually like, I thought he put it really into perspective well, and maybe that's just now being retired he has some, but I don't know, that didn't really strike. I think that's probably how he was as a player too. He didn't let the negative necessarily fuel him the way that you hear about all these other great athletes, but I think he was still able to use it and channel it in a more of a positive way.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like his poise was something that his teammates fed off of. I think he never got rattled in the clutch, and I think that was part of his great leadership. And Rod, you made a great point about his discipline, because how many times I've had people tell me they'd see him in the hallways at the Saints facility, and he didn't seem friendly. Like they'd walk by him in the hallway, and he was just kind of locked in, and hey, how you doing, and just keep going. They were like, they took that as standoffish, when actually he was just on his way to his next whatever it was on his agenda, and he's locked in, man. That's just how he is. People that knew him said that about him. But I think that preparation goes back to that story. I actually wrote about it in Payton-Brees. I think it's well documented of before their playoff game. I think it was in 2006. Doug Marone's told this story. They got a bye. They went 10-6 and got a first round bye. It was kind of one of those years where they got kind of lucky. So they got to sit out and wait on their opponent. I think it was the Giants. Eagles played the first round game, so they were waiting to see who they were going to play. And Payton tells the story about being in the facility on Airline Drive, and they look out the window of his office, and he sees this guy on the field on like a Saturday or Sunday of the week, the wild card weekend, and they realize it's Brees, and him and Marone go out to see what he's doing, and he was doing a walkthrough that he would have normally done during game week because he didn't want to break up his routine. And he was going through every pass play that they had in the script of if they played a game. And he's like, I realized then we had our leader, in 2006. It took him all the way to that was like the moment for Payton to realize, like, this guy is going to be our guy. He's going to take us places. And I don't know how very many people would do that. That's doing it on your own. You don't have a video camera. Like today, somebody'd be out there with a, Instagram post about it, showing how hard they work.
Goat emoji.
Yeah, he's just doing it because that's how he led, and that preparation, I think, paid off for him because he, like you said, Luke. He wasn't the biggest. He wasn't a prototype quarterback, so he had to max out on what he could max out on. That was his preparation. Every little thing he could control, he maxed out on because he couldn't control his God-given height.
And that's the thing I think that I will always come back to with Drew is like the everyman quality to him.
Yep.
He is. If you see him on the street, he's not going to look like a football player. If you see him on a football field, he looks small in comparison to everybody else. He is somebody who is just like absolutely an American success story of you are taking every single ounce of what you got and you're making yourself into something. And I think that's something that I'm always going to appreciate about him, is that you could be a person with marginal talent and you could see Drew Brees and be inspired by him because he did what he did through preparation, through focus, through grit. And obviously he was skilled. He was good enough to be an NFL football player, but there's probably a lot of people more talented than Drew Brees in the NFL right now who are never even going to sniff what he did as a teammate, as a football player, as all these things, as an icon, And then you take what you did on the football field and then you turn it into other stuff. and the all this stuff that he did in the community. I mean, his foundation has donated millions of dollars to charitable causes. In his last year as a pro football player, I think he donated like $5 million out of his own pocket to help feed people during the COVID pandemic. So I think there's a lot that any random human being could mine from Drew Brees' career. Be like, how does a person like that get to this level? And I think that's I will always personally appreciate that about him. And it's, you just don't see stuff like this happen very often. It takes a very rare person to take this kind of average to a little above average ability and become just absolutely great.
And I think Rob made a great point too. He came along at the right time. I mean, we'd just gone through Hurricane Katrina. There was kind of a dearth of leadership in the city at the time, so people were starving for like guidance and competence. And he steps into this void, and he's like the most competent leader the city maybe he's ever seen, even for government or civic causes. I mean, he just was that guy. And I think back to all the pandemonium. I mean, he was like huge. Remember how many like there were T-shirts, like Brees' T-shirts, and the crew of Drew, and people naming their kids. I did a story like for 3 or 4 year period. Andrew and Drew became one of the most popular names in Louisiana for boys. Like it was just a zenith of popularity. I've never quite seen anything like when he took off and led them to the Super Bowl. It was kind of magical.
I went to a brewery, and at their 9th brewing station, where they have like the big beer keg, there was like basically like a fat head of Drew Brees all along their brewing station, and they called it the Brees Station. So.
Yeah. Rosary candles, there's all these Drew Brees. People are going Drew Brees. And there was every Mardi Gras had Brees floats and stuff. Yeah, it was amazing. He appealed to everyone. I've said this before. I mean, in the city, sometimes we have our issues racially, like most cities, coming to grips with race relations. Everyone loved Drew Brees for the most part. You go to a Saints game and people of all colors, religious backgrounds, ethnicities wearing number 9 jerseys. He unified the city unlike we've ever really seen anybody do. I can, at least in my lifetime here, it was just remarkable how he kind of touched all parts of the city.
All right, let's go to your favorite Drew memory from the time you covered the team, or from the time you covered him. Jeff, you referenced mine earlier, but I'm interested to see what you guys have, and Matt, again, just play along here.
I have a game.
Somebody jump in there.
Okay,
I need to think.
Well, so this, again, covering Washington. In 2018, so the year after the comeback, they played on Monday Night Football, and I thought it was funny that Drew said, although the record games happened to be in prime time because, NFL schedule makers could tell that if you average this is about when it's going to be. And so he passed Peyton Manning for the all-time passing yards leader record now that Tom Brady holds. But at the time, it was still a very big deal. And, God, he just lit them up. He just picked on Josh Norman. And I was watching highlights of that game again before we got on here. And just a play in the back of the end zone where I think it's Josh Hill he finds that Norman just completely whiffs and Hill's wide open. And it was a game so bad that they benched Josh Norman at halftime. Washington did, but Norman was all mad of how the first half went, so he apparently had like headphones in the locker room and wasn't really paying attention. And so Jay Gruden, Washington's coach at the time, comes in and yanks the headphones off Norman and benched, and it was just a real ugly game for Washington. But that's how good Drew Brees was, and a fun aspect of him. We talk about Sean Payton willing to step on the gas and humiliate opponents, but Brees seemed fine with it for most of the time too. That guy was an ultimate competitor.
Yeah, I think that play in particular, really spoke to his greatness. I mean, Josh Norman played it a little wrong, but Brees told me about that play because we talked to him about it, he said that he did so much prep work and study, and obviously dropped back so many times in games over the career. Like he knew where cover 2 was, what it was supposed to look like, and what the coverage were. He said the comparison he made to me. He said it's like if you have your furniture in your living room and somebody came in while you were gone and just moved like the couch somewhere or moved things like a foot off. You would sense it when you came in. You'd walk in, you've seen how everything was positioned. He said, that's the way I see defenses. And I could tell he was just off in his angle, and he just threw it to a spot. That pass to Tre'Quan Smith, that ball never goes there. The way Sean Payton described it to me was
You're talking about the one that broke the record.
the record, yeah.
Okay,
that
yeah,
play is a clear-out route. He's running what they call I think they call it a bus route. In other words, you're supposed to just take the bus and just clear everybody out. But Brees saw right away Josh Norman didn't play it right, and he went to a spot, and that spoke, I think, to his greatness, right? That went how the play was drawn up, but ended up being a backbreaker play, right? It was like and what a great way to break the record.
Right.
It's magical.
Yeah. Drew is, as I think you've said it before, I've said it before, probably a lot of people said it. He's like a football supercomputer.
Yeah.
And that's all born out of the preparation and the focus and everything. And the way he processed stuff that's going on at about 1 million miles an hour around him was truly spectacular. Rod, you got a favorite moment?
Well, he brought up the Tre'Quan Smith play, and I was going to kind of mention that just because of just after the play, I actually went back and watched it, and just seeing how his teammates reacted to it. I remember Teron Armstead was like the first one to give Drew a hug, and this was on a Monday night. David Baker from the Hall of Fame on the sideline with his white gloves on with the ball, and giving it to.
How'd you pick out David Baker on the sideline?
I could barely. I didn't really realize that was him.
For those who don't know, David Baker was about 12 feet tall, impossible to miss. Yeah. Go on. I'm sorry.
But anyway,
for
yeah, I mean, and just seeing Drew interact with his kids and his wife, and for him to break the record with a touchdown pass was just typical Drew Brees. And to me, that one really stood out as far as a player, just because it was such a big record as well. I mean, it's one of the most storied records in the NFL, and he passed it with a touchdown pass.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many just insane games for Drew. I think he's one of 2 players in NFL history to throw for 500 yards and 7 touchdowns the same game. Wyatt Tittle being the other.
It was a Giants.
Yeah, against the Giants. It was like a
Eli Manning,
52 to 49 game or something like that. And the interesting part about that is both Brees and Tittle were native Texans who starred in Louisiana, with Wyatt Tittle doing it at LSU. I think he had
we're gonna start hitting the bell for LSU.
Yeah, for LSU.
For Luke LSU.
Soft bell.
Good call.
There was I think it was against the Patriots. He threw more touchdowns than he threw incompletions. He had a perfect passer rating in that game, beating Tom Brady. I mean the list goes on and on and on. And like especially when you're talking about home games, I went back through a couple years ago and just like looked at all the single season home game records that he held. It's like he had like most passing yards in a season in home games in NFL history, most touchdowns in a season at home games in NFL history, highest completion percentage, yada yada yada. The whole list. He had all of them because he was awesome at the Superdome. But I think the one that I will always think about, just because it was such an insane game, is that Colts game that you were bringing up earlier.
Right.
He went 29 of 30 for 307 yards and 4 touchdowns.
That's insane.
29 of 30. It's like a 97% completion percentage.
And the one incompletion was kind of like should have been caught,
Should
right?
have been caught, yeah.
Yeah, it was like right off the guy's fingertips or something like that.
I mean, that game to me is just like the quintessential Drew game, and this happened in 2019, late in the season in 2019.
Yep.
I think after he'd come back from the thumb injury, and just absolutely automatic. There's nothing you could do because he knows what you're going to do defensively. He still had the ability to put it there, and I mean, just absolutely unreal. And that was the game where he broke Peyton Manning's career touchdown pass record. So, again, you could just like pick just about from every season you could pick one individual game, or you're like, it's probably the best game of some dude's career.
There's a play I'm going to put. I'll put it on social media, so look for it later today. I wrote about this in that Payton-Brees book because it's a play that Pete Carmichael and Joe Lombardi and Peyton show to all the quarterbacks that come in. And the name of the chapter is, who makes that pass or who makes that throw, because that's what they were saying to each other, the coaches, as they watched Brees make this pass. It was a pass to Billy Miller, is when they played against the Chargers in London in 2008, I think it was. And it's this play, if you watch it, and I'll put the video up, of like they're all in man-to-man coverage. Brees is dropping back, and if you look at it from behind, you have to watch it from the end zone angle to appreciate it. But there's just this crisscrossing of coverage, receivers going every which way, and he goes to throw the ball. There's just no way you would think you'd ever release it, even try to make the pass. And they all just kind of part like the Red Sea, and Miller emerges into this void, and it's like a huge third down completion that kind of put the game away. But they show that to all the other quarterbacks that come in here of like, this is all about anticipation, knowing where everybody's supposed to be, predicting where your guy's going to end up. And it's just a remarkable pass. I mean, I'm still, you can freeze frame it and see all these defenders in where he's going to throw it. And it's just, he knew it was all going to play out that way. That's what he did all the time.
And that's the thing that made him special. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at earlier. Like Drew obviously had tons of ability, right? But like, for every like highlight you'll see of Josh Allen throwing the ball 80 yards on a rope, or
right,
Lamar Jackson outrunning 8 defenders to the end zone, like that ability to see the field in 3 dimensions and to know where everybody's going to be when you got 21 moving players in front of you, and to throw a ball where there's nothing there and then it clears as the ball's in the air. I mean, that's the sort of stuff that just really never comes along.
But that's also what I remember Tom House saying, like, in this day and age of social media and everybody posting videos of the Josh Allens and Lamar Jacksons, that everyone can see this spectacular athleticism. That nuanced ability is much harder to appreciate. And that's what I don't think he's quite reached the echelon in the general public's eye of his greatness when he should, because his greatness is much more sophisticated and nuanced in this day and age where everything's more just like, I need the visual.
Need the wow.
The wow play. That's not Drew Brees. He's not a wow guy. But when you look at that, you're like, wow.
Another thing for me is in these, 4th and 1 or on the goal line, and Drew lines up under center.
Oh God.
He's going.
You know what's going to happen.
You know what's going to happen, and nobody could stop it.
I know.
It was just incredible to me that he could do that.
Yeah.
Did it forever, and no one ever
right,
stopped it, I don't think, did they?
Yeah.
Did they ever stop it?
Yeah, the Brees leap. I mean, it's something like a 95 or 98% success rate on that. Absolutely unbelievable. And that goes back to the Sean Payton thing, where he's like, he's a way better athlete than you think he is.
Yeah, and he always brings that up.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a great baseball player, great tennis player, like a high-level junior tennis player ranked in the state of Texas, and soccer was a stud. He's one. All these guys were like that, but I mean, he was even better. I mean, he went to Purdue. He was going to play baseball at Purdue, Big Ten school. So, yeah, his hand-eye coordination, all that kind of stuff. And then he took it to another level with when he left the Chargers and came to New Orleans with his like self kind of evaluation. I mean, he did like all this nutrition work and suddenly became a nerd on what he was eating and all that stuff. Took it to another level.
All right, so let's wrap things up here. And Drew talked a lot about this yesterday, but obviously before he came here, he suffered this dramatic, nearly career-ending injury, dislocated his shoulder, and I think it was like a full tear of his labrum, right? Yep. Had to go to Dr. James Andrews in Birmingham, get the surgery. Couldn't do anything even like in the first couple months he was with the Saints. But one of the things that Andrews told him in that is basically like, your shoulder is going to be a degenerative shoulder injury. Like at some point, it's just not going to work anymore. And he's at that point now. He's talking about when he's playing catch with these kids. He's throwing left-handed. He's throwing 30-yard dimes left-handed, but he's not throwing with his right arm anymore. And this is kind of what leads to this last topic here. Is Drew spoke yesterday and he said, "My body was still feeling great. I was still feeling great. I could have played for another 3 years." But the arm wasn't holding up, and that was evident. Even his last game against Tampa, I mean, it was just you could tell.
Yep.
He didn't have it anymore in the arm. But let's just play like a what if game, right? And what if Drew's shoulder held up for another 3 years? And, he was playing, kind of like at the level we saw in 2018 when he was a runner-up in the MVP voting and would have gotten it if not for, Patrick Mahomes having literally the best season Patrick Mahomes has ever had. Right? I think like 50 touchdown passes against like 10 interceptions, something like that. Drew, I think at one point that year had 28 touchdowns against 2 interceptions before his body started breaking down at the end of the year. If Drew's playing at even the level he was playing at in 19 and 20, he plays for another 3 years. I mean, what do you think? What do you think Saints history looks like with that?
I think I just start with the 2020 season because I was kind of just looking back at it, and I think if Michael Thomas doesn't get hurt early in that season, I think Drew's season would have been a whole lot better than it was because, I mean, they had developed such good chemistry, and he wouldn't have had to sling it downfield. I mean, you got Michael Thomas, so you could. I mean, he had just caught 149 passes the year before that, so I think they could have rolled that out a little bit longer, and who knows what happens, if that works out like that. So, so just for that season, I think he could have been a lot better if Mike hadn't got hurt. But yeah, I mean, as far as the next, you're saying 3 years? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, let's say he played another 3 years. So he played 21, 22, 23, and last year was his last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think this team, at the level of 2018, yeah, I think.
Well, yeah, but even at 2020, right? Even when he was playing hurt, I mean, he was still Drew. Just putting it frankly, that year Drew still played at a higher level than what we've seen out of a Saints quarterback since.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think obviously they'd be in better shape. I don't know. I mean, do you think is Sean still coaching now? I mean,
that's another thing.
That's another, yeah. So I mean, I think,
it's a good
I
point.
mean, I would think Sean is still coaching. Given he's in his 40s, I think you would start to see some gradual decline, just what it normally was. Like that Brady last season was not Tom Brady. They finished 8-9. He looked like he was kind of scared to get hit at times. Like I feel like maybe that would have started to happen to Brees, where you're trying to avoid as much contact as possible. So like, I think maybe they're still kind of in that 9-win range, but I just think certainly those. The 21 season, the 20 season, like if he had a healthy arm, then they're right back in the mix for actual contention. But I just think those later years. I do think, though, we talked about Tom. I mentioned earlier about how Tom Brady passed that record that Brees had. I actually think Brees would probably still have all his records if he was able to play another 3 years.
Yeah, I was going to say that. He'd have every record in the book. He'd beat Brady out. But, I mean, it would have been him and Brady probably battling.
Whoever lasted longest will probably have
Yeah, right. But the other thing Brees did, the intangible thing that I think we see where they're missing him now, is he kept – I mean, everyone had such great respect for him in the locker room. He kind of kept that culture single-handedly intact. And with him not in the building now, we saw things start to go awry a little bit. His attention to detail, his level of professionalism was infectious in the building. Like, people didn't want to let him down, so they stayed and studied more. We heard stories this past year, guys not opening their playbooks, their tablets, and that wouldn't have happened with Brees here. It just would not. I mean, he was that guy that really lifted everyone else in the building. And when you lose a leader of that caliber, there's an inevitable drop-off. It's not just here. It's historically throughout the NFL when guys like that leave, when Hall of Fame quarterbacks leave. I think there's statistically a drop-off of like 2.5 to 3 wins you lose. That's what we've seen here. It's almost to the T of how many losses this team or how many wins this team's lost without him in the building.
You're saying you wouldn't have been compared to any gardening rakes?
Maybe might still have. I don't know. Me, I would have been. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, Drew had that ability. I mean, Mike Thomas really respected Drew. He would. I don't think. Well, he definitely wouldn't have gone online and like thrown Drew Brees under the bus, and that had a effect throughout the building.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to your point, I mean, outside of the Green Bay Packers, right, who've somehow maybe done it again with Jordan Love replacing Aaron Rodgers, teams that have to replace Hall of Fame level quarterback play typically go through the rough patches afterwards. Saints are kind of in that right now. We'll see what Derek Carr has in store for year 2, but like being fair to Derek Carr, there's no comparison between him and Drew Brees right now.
Right.
Well, I think Foster Moreau brought this up last year, and I thought it was a really interesting point, is because the way Drew Brees was, even just personality-wise, like, and he got fans kind of, Moreau didn't use the word spoiled, but people were so accustomed to the way Drew Brees ran things, the way that the success that came with it, that I honestly think part of the reason why Derek Carr is so polarizing here specifically is because he's not Drew Brees, and fans can see the way that it's supposed to be done, and it's alienated Carr, I think, somewhat unfairly. And that's kind of actually one of the main things I'm interested to seeing this upcoming season is whether Carr can maybe restore that reputation that he has among Saints fans and whether they can warm up to him at all.
Yeah. It's going to be hard for anybody to follow those footsteps. I mean, even with Jameis and Taysom when they were battling, when we saw how divided the fan base was then, just replacing Drew is going to be really hard for anybody.
Well, we will see Drew again in the Superdome at some point this season. Still don't know when that will be for his official induction in the Saints Hall of Fame, and sooner or later maybe they'll officially retire number 9. Jeff, you think that'll ever happen?
That'll be interesting. That's a good point. Well, he's definitely going to go up in the Ring of Honor, right? I think that'll probably happen maybe the year he goes into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I could see them coinciding that, but they have not retired any jerseys. Saints don't do the jersey retirement officially, so I don't know.
Well, as we've stated, I think somebody called him arguably the greatest Saints player in history. I don't think there's any argument there.
Right, no doubt.
He is hands down, far and away, the best player who's ever suited up in a Saints uniform. So if anybody was going to have that honor, it would be number 9.
Spencer Rattler, number 2, probably. Yeah.
All right, guys. That is all we have for today. Congratulations to Drew Brees on his honor, first of many to come for him as a Hall of Famer. We will be back out here next week. Saints have OTA practices on Wednesday next week. I think we're going to be back out here on Tuesday, and we'll have some more Saints content for you. So until then, give us a listen, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and we'll try to keep giving you guys the best Saints content we can. For Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, Jeff Duncan, I'm Luke Johnson. Norman Bell is behind the glass, and we will see y'all next week.